Boy Scouts, you can cut one of the corners off of that because some like they did with your whittling chip. If you broke like the whittling rules, like that's a corner off my nerd card.
Yep. Yep. Oh
Oh
man.
God, yeah, my name just read Dale for some reason, and
Yeah.
then refused to acknowledge that that's the word Dalek.
Yeah. Anyway, yes. Sorry, I don't know at what point we came back, but yeah, we're back. Sorry, everybody. I don't know what just happened. So
I didn't really have a story. It was mostly just me remarking on the fact that that con season basically made it so April happened, and then it was the end of August. And that's about
yep.
how my life feels like it's been.
Yeah.
So, also, I'm watching an ad, so now I'm just okay. I'm
Oh,
done. Hell yeah,
again. Welcome back,
yeah.
everybody. Sorry. I truly have no idea what is happening with the stream today. Like a lot of weird shit's going on. Some of it was my fault. Some of it was just yeah, I don't know. I don't know what's happening. The disconnecting I don't think it was my fault. All I did was like slightly move my computer, but that shouldn't have done anything.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, no. I don't have like a burning question right now, so instead I will simply ask, what's everyone been cooking lately? Because I want to know.
Oh boy.
Freeman, you were talking about this before stream, so.
Yep.
Damn.
I mean,
Okay. I haven't actually cooked anything this week.
yeah.
Just like prepping a lot of food for others to cook at a later date. That's what part of my job is.
Yeah.
So that's. I mean, it's. Yeah. Oh, you know what? There was the part of the recipe for the impossible meatballs that I prepped today. Part of the recipe called for oatmeal, and I had to cook that.
Oh, hell yeah.
I think that counts.
That counts.
Cook some oatmeal.
I drew Littlest Drummer out of hiding by merely saying the word cooking.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know that I've been doing these last couple weeks. There hasn't been a whole lot of cooking going on, mainly because everybody's kind of been coming and going quite a lot, so there hasn't really been a whole lot of time. It's mostly just been like snacking or like putting like small things together, like sandwiches and shit like that. So like or just leftovers. So I don't know that there's been a whole lot of cooking happening.
Nothing like a well-built sandwich, though.
The one that I had today was truly awful. Genuinely one of the worst sandwiches I've ever made for myself. So we don't need to talk about that.
Oh no. I made one of my recent favorites because I planted a whole bunch of basil in my backyard, and now I just have like a little like foot and a half long, kind of like foot and a half or so high hedge of basil in our backyard.
Hell yeah.
And so kind of like every other week, I just go out there and trim a bunch of that off. Fuckload of pesto. Which again is remarkably easy to make, actually, if you have a blender and a lot of basil.
Yeah.
I think the worst part about it is getting pine nuts, but if you look in the right places, you can get several pounds of them for cheaper than you would usually get pine nuts, and that's the way to go.
Is it like bulk is cheaper than? Yeah, that's kind of what I figured. Yeah.
Always cheaper than
Almost
bulk.
a shame, though. Unless you were making lots of it.
Yeah. I make it's pretty regular, and the nice thing about basil is that it's a perennial, so it'll be back next year. Now that I've planted it in our backyard, there's no getting rid of it. It's here to stay. Whoever lives here after us also had.
Very nice.
Oh no, a fragrant weed in their backyard. But
it's so good. It's a good smell. That and tomato. I do like the smell of tomato plants as well.
I think tomatoes are frankly on our garden list for next year.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Good.
They're a good one to have, honestly. I remember like being little and like in my grandmother's garden out back. just the strong smell of tomato and basil growing back there. Yeah.
That's excellent.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like become part of my morning ritual now to like when I get up, I come down like when I first come downstairs, I set out all of the ingredients for my breakfast, like get all the stuff for my breakfast smoothie ready, and then I just go outside and water the garden, and then we planted some lilac bushes. Go and water those, and like
Oh wow,
it's
Yeah.
a very nice like morning routine for me.
that's a good like meditative way to start things off.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely.
Love
It's kind
that.
of nice actually. Um, like I've eaten frozen pizza multiple times this week. And William says, "Yeah, I listen. I have also been multiple frozen pizzas this week before."
Yeah.
I will also
Sometimes.
say
Nothing
I
wrong with
have
it.
I have eaten out a lot this week too. So
Me too. Yeah. That's kind of what a lot of the last
Yeah.
couple of weeks have been. Just like I said, everybody's kind of coming and going, and there really hasn't been a whole lot of like good time to like sit, have like a full
Mm-hmm.
meal, and yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah,
also, I just wanted to note that Little Liz Drummer said my mom has been making congee lately, and that sounds also pretty tasty.
absolutely. Yeah. Last night was D&D night, and I grabbed from like the local pho place. I grabbed a banh mi sandwich and pork egg rolls.
Mm-hmm.
So good.
Mm-hmm.
I love that I love that I have access to banh mi sandwiches now regularly, because I'd never had one until college, and then I had it. And I was like, holy shit, this is the best thing I've ever had. And then
Banh mi
like
are so
they're
good.
so good. And then I couldn't find any until, oh, I guess I'd never gone to the pho place until recently. But yeah, turns out if I'd been going there sooner, I might have had banh mi sandwiches. So the sandwich
It's
It
been a long.
it's
Go ahead,
got like
Lucas.
it's like parsley and like julienne pickled carrots, and like uh usually there's some kind of like sweet and spicy sort of sauce, and then for the protein it's usually like Vietnamese ham, but you can do it with like beef or like other kinds of meat. I've seen it with chicken. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Mm.
Usually some kind
real
of
good.
pork on some kind of pork on there.
Yeah, yeah, it's like my favorite actually is with shrimp. That's the one that's my favorite, with like the.
Ooh.
Hmm. But I
That's what I
haven't.
would.
I don't have. Oh, and daikon. It has daikon in it too. Yeah. So like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. Um. But
I had
yeah.
one of those for the first time when I moved to the Twin Cities, and that was like a life altering experience. I was like,
Truly.
holy shit, banh mi are amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. There's also like in like a couple towns over. There's this like Asian fusion place, like a little Asian fusion cafe, and they have really good banh mi sandwiches there too. It's so good.
Yeah.
They're very different from the ones like in the pho place here, but like they are so good. Yeah, odds. You're absolutely right about that. I live in a pretty like remote area, um, not super like not super close. I'm like, by any metric, whether you're taking ferries or driving, it's like 2 hours to get to Seattle. Um, so it's hard to get good food in a lot of places where I am, or at least selection wise, it's pretty tough. But yeah, it's you got to get real creative with knowing how and where to look. But yeah, but you can usually find something pretty decent. Not as easily as you can in like a city though.
I think the way that it is spelled is like this.
Yeah, that's correct.
If I am remembering
Or
correctly.
is it? Is it? Hold on.
It's got some accents on it that I did not
Okay,
type, but
fair
yeah,
enough.
it's BANHMI.
Okay.
The accents should look like that.
Yeah.
Copying those, but
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
It's
no,
real
banh
good.
mi, banh mi are so good.
Yeah.
As with a lot of a lot of similar like foods that seems like the preparation would be a lot. So I'm happy to go out and get those.
Absolutely, yeah. I do want to make my own at some point, though. I just like I've had all of the ingredients for it at different times.
And
So,
never all right at the
exactly.
planets didn't align.
Exactly. So,
Should know.
Like I've got 66% of a banh mi sandwich in my house right now.
I'm without knowing what the actual like sauces, how the actual sauce is typically made. I actually did a pretty solid approximation of it just by like taking stuff that I had here. Um, so, but now but because of that, that just made me even more curious to like look up how it's made. Just like how close was
Yeah.
I, and like
Yeah, how close to the mark was I with that sauce? I'll say y'all who live in cities get to have such different food experiences. And yeah, absolutely. That is something that I definitely will acknowledge. Ever since I moved to the Twin Cities, my like palate and like the kinds of food that I am exposed to and get to have regularly are very different. And that's not just in terms of like the foods that I can go out to eat, but also like just along the like main street that runs past me a couple blocks up, there are a truckload of like Asian grocery stores and stuff along there. Like I'm pretty sure there's a Thai market, like the Vietnamese market as well.
Oh, that's awesome.
There's a couple of other like I can't remember if they're like specific ones or not, but like there's a couple of more like non just like your regular run of the mill grocery stores all along it. And so even there, like it's super easy for me to just go and pick up ingredients that aren't like your standard American fare. Yeah, even if that's it. Even grocery shopping wise, you got every kind of markets. Yeah, and like if I want to go to a butcher to get like a specific cut of meat, I can do that.
Exactly.
I have a lot of advantages in that regard.
I also wanted. Maggie said we tried a new Vietnamese place this evening, and my dad did not realize the portions of cream cheese wontons were 6 large wontons per order. He got 4 orders. Jesus, that is.
I
mean, you know what? It's fair though, because so often like you get those and they'll give you like 3 of them, and they're like these little, they're like, and you get like 3 of them in an order. So like I completely understand the impulse. That said, yikes.
Yeah. Yeah. No, see, like that's a fair mistake to make, I think, because so often you like arrive like raring and ready to go, and you're like, okay, so we're gonna get a big pile of these because they're teeny tiny, and that's been the case almost everywhere that I go. And then sometimes they trot them out and they're gigantic.
Ooh.
Yep.
Give me a dinner plate sized cream cheese wonton.
Yeah.
So much. Jesus. I would die eating that. Like I would love every second of it, but I would be dead at the end. Like I would be dead.
I think I would like my heart would just it wouldn't be because it was blocked, it's just because it would be so angry at me that my heart would just be like, no, fuck you. Like, I'm done.
God, I'd die from, my heart would be so happy I'd die from happiness.
That too.
Ascend to a higher plane of existence.
And a liter of dipping sauce. A whole liter, yeah. Oh God.
Saying that though reminds me of this old this old place, and this is family owned, shut down decades ago. Place in my hometown called the Bagel Depot. And they had like, I shit you not, dinner plate sized cinnamon rolls, like homemade cinnamon rolls that you could come in and get. And we would always go there after church on Sundays and get one of those huge cinnamon rolls. And like they would, like half of the cinnamon roll would wind up coming home to be eaten for breakfast a couple of days.
Yep.
For the next couple of days.
Yep.
So.
Oh man, now I want cinnamon rolls.
I almost do, but it's really tricky getting a good one. I think, because if it's too sweet and it overpowers the cinnamon, because it's just like icing. No,
Yeah.
if the cinnamon's overpowering, it's too dry, and you're getting cinnamon powder. Then which I've experienced both of those extremes.
Yeah. Hi, Allison. Good to see you.
Hello.
Allison, hello.
Crafty things in the background, huh?
Ooh, what
Wait,
kind of
Allison doing crafty things? That doesn't sound that doesn't sound like her. No, that sounds.
Just
No.
I'm gonna dig out my water bottle that Allison made.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, no.
I'm not clue.
Damn, I didn't get the memo.
I didn't either. I was just lucky that I kept it on the desk here because when Lucas pulled it, I was like, "Oh, I got pow."
I mean,
Look
you
at
are
us.
Freeman Pop Man Luoma, so like.
Yep.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
Yep.
Do you still have the pine cone?
Yeah, it's on the shelf over there.
Okay, cool.
It's a nice little shelf. It's an ornament for my bookshelf now. It's kind of nice. Almost heavy enough to be a book weight, but not
Yeah.
quite.
Wait, it bleeped you? It didn't bleep you on my end, so if that makes you feel
Yeah,
any better.
you might have like a profanity filter or something turned on in your like the settings on your side on Twitch, because that is actually a thing. But oh my god. You know what I said? We do. I also.
Oh my gosh.
I saw one more of those this week, actually, too, over at Bree's house when I was streaming Stray Gods yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
I saw the Mistra one over there.
Yep.
There we go.
Yep. Oh man. Yeah.
Yeah.
Freeman has a prop 2 times.
That's right. I forgot about that one.
Yeah, me too.
We have honestly, I have fully our Nightbot is a lawless wasteland because I truly am not keeping track of what's going on in there. Like I don't know most of the commands in our Nightbot.
Soon enough, it'll grow conscience and
Yeah.
sentience.
Yeah, all of those people out there like trying to train their own generative AI models while Nightbot has been sentient for years.
Way far ahead of the game.
People talking about Chat GPT and Nightbot's out here like, do not cite the deep magic to me, witch. I was there. It was written.
Somebody who's just fully like made so many Nightbot commands that they can just have a full conversation with Nightbot.
Yeah. Oh,
Allison just says, "Hi, I like making things: coffee cups, Taylor Swift friendship bracelets, custom worlds for my friends to play in. Trauma." No, we wouldn't know anything about that last one.
Nope, not at all.
Oh my god, it gets longer.
I wouldn't know anything about a bracelet either whatsoever.
No, definitely not. What I'm talking about.
Oh man. Man, I feel like I have so many like fragments of thoughts that I like keep thinking of like bringing up, but they're just like not full thoughts, which I guess is kind of analogous to how my day has been today. It's just been a whole day of like almost thinking of doing stuff and then not quite managing to do it.
Yeah. It's been like that's a little bit where I'm at too, is where I'll be like, I think I'll have like half of a good question, and then I'll be like, nope, it's gone. It just wandered out my other ear.
Yeah.
There it goes forever.
I was strolled off. Kind of trotted off.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Talking about food and like moving to the city, and then reminiscing about the cinnamon roll place just had me thinking about like reminiscing about childhood experiences, and now like having a very different adult life than I think child me had imagined. Matt, you are on fire tonight.
Well, sadly, I cannot see what it is because my iPad died.
Matt made a exclamation trauma command, and it just says Allison has caused emotional damage one time.
Love it. Oh,
incredible.
Yeah, I did see an interesting comment earlier about game design and
Mm-hmm.
tabletop RPGs and stuff, which was that tabletop RPG game mechanics answer questions. Um, Vince Baker who said it, but and I think that's an interesting thought to me, right? That mechanics exist to answer questions. And so if you're a designer or even like kind of on the GM side of things, if you're running games, it's your job to set up questions and provide mechanics to answer them, but not necessarily it's explicitly not your job to answer most of the questions in your universe or like in the game that you're making, which I think is kind of like it's an interesting approach to thinking about those things, right?
Huh. Hold on. So, I have questions about that. So, put a pin in that for a second because
Mm-hmm.
I have, but I just want to acknowledge, newly human. I wrote something for the first time in years last night. It was a single paragraph, and we were so fucking back. I am so happy for you. That's awesome. That's a great place to be, and I'm so glad that happened. So, good work. Good work. It's a tough place to climb back to. I know that from personal experience. So, good on you. Um, I just wanted to take a second to acknowledge that because that's a big
Mm-hmm.
thing.
Hmm.
But to your point, John, the question that I had for you was, um, huh? No, I'm just kidding. The
Love that.
no, the question,
Love
no, no,
that.
but I am I'm curious what you mean. So like, could you explain that a little bit more? Because
Yeah, I think I saw this quote kind of taken a little bit out of context,
mm-hmm.
which was and the get back to it here, um, but like game mechanics answer questions. So if
Mm-hmm.
you as the game designer are making a mechanic, you're making something that answers a question in your world, and sometimes it's better for you to leave the question open. It's better for you to leave to like essentially make that framework for something to happen in, but not necessarily put anything in it, right?
Okay.
So like you want like I think it's essentially I think what it says to me almost is that when you are designing a game or from like a game master perspective, even when you're looking at an encounter, you want like an equal amount of questions and also answers,
Huh. So
or like it not, if not an equal amount, then like a balance of each.
do you have an example of like
I think
what you're talking about, or like an example
um
of the like creating a framework to answer questions but not creating answers to the questions.
mhm. I think like the one that was used here was in the context of Possum Creek's next game, Yazeba's Bed and Breakfast, which is this neat little like slice of life game where you each play as like a cast of characters that are pre-generated for the that live at the bed and breakfast, and each of them have kind of their own unique like story tracks and things that can happen, and it's a so it's a cool slice of life RPG, and the conversation about it was how like Yuzebas is basically about how we feel as the characters change, but the game doesn't actually like, and the game creates essentially like lots of ways for those characters to change, but it doesn't tell you
Gotcha.
how those changes connect to each other. It doesn't say like when
Sure.
this character does this, this happens, right? It
Okay.
just causes the characters to change like as a part of gameplay, but then those changes don't
Mm.
necessarily interact explicitly with other changes. They wind up doing that because of the way that the game plays. You know, you pick up another character and you look at their track and you see that Hey Kid is now Hey Teen instead because, you know, they've gone a certain way along their like story arc and something has happened. So they play differently now. And that changes how you interact with somebody, changes how you might feel about that character. But there's no explicit way in there to be like, oh, yeah, no, when this character reaches this point in their story track, it means that they interact this way.
Mm. Okay. Interesting. I Yeah, I hear what you're saying. And now I'm trying to like see if I can apply that to other games that I know and see like where it applies in other games that I know. Like
Mm.
the one that I've been, you know, that I'm the most familiar with currently because I've been using it so much is the Walking Dead RPG. Um, I'm trying to figure out, like, I don't think this is exactly the same thing, but there's a mechanic in it called the Luck Oracle,
Mm-hmm.
um, which is explicit. And like the thing that I think is cool about it is that it is a mechanic that I think it's something that I think most GMs will do anyway on their own. When like a player asks them a question that they don't explicitly have an answer for, then they're like, "Ah, I'm gonna roll a die and just determine." But they in that moment, it's weird because they are not only rolling a die to randomly determine the answer, but they're also determining the criteria for the die to roll to determine what the answer is going to be on the fly. And I like that The Walking Dead actually includes a like, okay, if you roll this or this through this, the answer is no. If they roll this through this, the answer is a soft no. If it's this, then the answer is a soft yes. If it's this, the answer is a hard yes, right? And so, like, if a player asks the GM a question that they don't explicitly have an answer for, then they roll the luck oracle in
Mm-hmm.
order to answer the question. And I think that's not quite the same thing that you're talking about, but I think it's also not unrelated because it is a means by which the game has provided to answer questions.
Yeah, and I think actually a good example in the Walking Dead RPG is that like you have a drive and an issue,
Mm-hmm.
um, and your drive has a mechanical purpose, right? It
Mm-hmm.
makes you better at something explicitly.
Right.
um Once per session, I think it is, you can like tick a little box next to your drive on the character sheet in the Walking Dead RPG, and you can use it to give yourself +2. So like, because my character has a higher purpose or something like that, I can use that to gain an advantage, you know and that's I think like something that answers a question: why am I good at this, or why am I doing this,
Mm.
or why did this happen this way? Well, it's because of this thing. And then the issue, on the other hand, it doesn't have that attached to it, but it's still there on your character sheet, and it very much informs how you play your character. It's something like that I think asks a question without answering it.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
So like, my character's sworn to help. Casey, or the alternate version of him that I played for our test game at home,
Mm-hmm.
both had that character trait. One of the ones that comes with the doctor like archetype, and that's one that I think doesn't have like an answer necessarily.
Yeah, that's interesting. Okay,
Mm.
I think I see what you mean. Yeah, yeah, that's interesting. Now I'm trying to go the other way and apply it to like being a GM as opposed to game design. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
how would you apply that same concept to like being a GM? Do you think?
Yeah, I think on the GM side of things, that's almost like when you're looking at planning for more simulationist games, the ones that I think a lot of us are familiar with, something like Dungeons and Dragons or Pathfinder. I think that's the difference between being like, okay, here's all of these elements in the room, in order to like turn off this like magical barrier that the boss has. You must transport this orb to a different part of the room. You've like mechanized a part of that fight.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like, well, how do I defeat the boss? And like there's like a very concrete like series of steps that you've taken to do that. And I think on the other end of the spectrum, there is, um, I suppose I have like a half
Mm.
formed answer to this in my head, but kind
Mm-hmm.
of what I'm getting at is just like the things that you like make very concrete, the things that you like know need to happen here, and then the other things that when you're planning, you're like, I think it's better to leave this open and see what happens, or just like to present the option here. Do I want to go
Right.
directly to the boss fight or whatever? I don't know.
Hmm.
Mm.
I'm kicking around a little bit on that topic myself.
Yeah, because like from a GM side, it sort of feels like it might be more of a like the common wisdom for GMing, which is like prepare your sessions as if you are creating a connect the dots where there
Mm-hmm.
are distinct points that you want to hit, but you don't really your job is to create those points and then let the players find the define the paths between those dots. And so to me, it seems like it's maybe the way that you apply that same concept to GMing is more in terms of that, right? Where you're creating I don't even think that's exactly right. Or it's like you're creating kind of a framework, a loose framework of events, but not defining what those events necessarily.
Yeah, not necessarily deciding how all of the eventualities are going to interact with each other, right? You can put a horde of goblins in the room, you can put a hobgoblin in the room, and you can put a barrel full of explosives like in one corner of the room.
Mm-hmm.
And you've created a series of bullet point. Oh, and one of the goblins has a torch. And like you've created a bunch of bullet points here kind of like at random, or maybe like one of them is a goblin wizard who can cast fireball for some fucking reason. Right, you've created like a bunch of pieces, but not necessarily supplied the answer. Like a great way to solve this encounter then is rolling a barrel of stuff of explosives into the middle of the room and setting it on fire, and that blows up all of the goblins, right? But in just placing those things in the room and then stopping there, you've created opportunities for people to interact.
I'm sorry. I'm laughing because I thought of the thought that entered into my brain when you were setting up that scenario is a goblin wizard who can cast fireball is a problem that kind of solves itself. And that's
how long have you been down there? 11 days. How long do kobolds live? 11 days.
Oh god. Yeah. That is interesting. I've been thinking a lot about like design recently. What I've realized this is a weird, maybe this is obvious to a lot of people, but what I've found is that as a GM, I used to think like, oh yeah, I do like so sorry. I used to think that like I do a lot of game design adjacent tasks, and it's not untrue that I, as a GM, that I do that, but I think it is much more like the thing that I'm realizing recently is that the thing that I am doing more often than game design is narrative design. And basically what I do, where the design elements, like game design elements, come in is like planning around those narrative elements, right? But around the narrative design, where I'm like, okay, now how do I represent this narrative thing in a mechanics capacity? And like that's the thing that I've been thinking about recently. As many of you who have like spoken to me or who have like watched Ramblemancy a lot, and or have played games with me, know one of my biggest sort of quests within GMing is figuring out good rules for overland travel that get at what I want them to do, that do what I want them to do. They don't exist just to exist, but that they exist for a purpose. And so that's something that I've been thinking about a lot recently, especially since like in our home game, we're doing a very like exploration based game, and you don't need overland travel rules. I mean, let me be clear about this. You do not need overland travel or even exploration rules in any normal standard game of D&D or whatever. But if that's what your game is about, then it shouldn't just be something that you hand wave, because then it feels unsatisfying. And more than being unsatisfying, it also means that it kind of defeats the purpose, and you end up just playing combat-based D&D anyway, because that's the thing that is clearly defined. So it helps if you're doing like an exploration-based thing to have just as clearly defined rules for travel and exploration. And so like that's something that I've been like focused on a lot in these last few years, and but the design part of it like is the mechanics, but the part of it that I care about is the narrative of exploring the wilderness and traveling through like dangerous territory and that kind of stuff, and the interactions that happen between the party therein, and the challenges that they overcome together as a group, that matters to me. But it matters to me with specifically in the context of exploration and travel. And so then the design, like the game design as opposed to the narrative design, is built around the narrative concepts. And so I find that most of what I do, as far as my GM prep, is narrative design that then I retroactively fit game design around.
Mm-hmm. I think to put it in the terms of the things we were talking about, like the question that you're answering is, what does it feel like to live in and explore Chult? Like, what's it feel like to be a person who lives here? And that, like, those mechanics answer that question. And then what do people make of it? I think is the next question that those mechanics don't answer.
Right.
And that's what it leaves open for people, right?
Mhm.
It provides this, like, you basically are setting people up to like live to play out a specific kind of play style for D&D. And then the way that they then like interact and explore, and like the kind of like story beats you have will change because of that, but you don't like clearly define what those are. You've just kind of made it very focused on everyday life and exploration in the jungles of Chult. And now as a result, like characters will have, like players will have that experience and their characters respond accordingly. And those are the dots that like are kind of connecting.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, Invert! Wow, hello, hi, hey everybody.
Speaking of Dungeons and Dragons, Invert, what were you up to on stream today? Was it, could it be Baldur's Gate?
Ooh.
I don't want to talk about Baldur's Gate. It consumes enough of my waking hours as it is.
We did. I mean, we can double back a tiny bit on the conversation we had last week. Ooh, Starfield.
Starfield. Yeah, man. I want to get my hands on Starfield, but like I can't right now. I just can't do it. I can't do it. Both in terms of time and in terms of like I just can't justify it money wise. I can't do it. But I'm so excited that you're getting a chance to play it in as minimal a way as you can. How are you feeling about it thus far? Yeah? Good? Super expensive, but a lot of fun. Yeah. That's kind of where I'm at too with it. Like this is a game that was specifically targeted at me. And I just can't justify it. But welcome everybody from the raid. Thanks for coming on in. For those of you who don't know, we're Rule of Lore, and on Fridays we do Ramblemancy, where we come hang out, we chat about all kinds of nerdy stuff, and usually we have a topic, but more often actually lately we just sort of go have a free range ramble and kind of talk a little bit about everything, kind of go all over the place and let the conversation go where it goes. Oh yeah, Game Pass. That's a I might have to look into that.
What is that?
Oh,
it's basically, oh God, I'm not sure I'm familiar enough with how Game Pass works in order to like explain it well, but I'm not going to attempt it. It's basically a means by which you can like, it's sort of like I think it's a subscription service that you can sign up for and then like play certain games for like a period of time, but like you don't, I think it's, yeah, Netflix with games. Thank you. That's a way better way of putting it.
Oh,
yeah.
Interesting.
Thank you, Wereblake. Yeah, it's basically like it's like a streamed, right? Like that's how the games work. Like you're essentially streaming the game to your machine. I don't know. I've already said more than I know about it, so I like have a vague understanding of what it is, and it pretty much begins and ends with Netflix with games.
That is all I needed to hear. That makes sense to me.
Yep.
Well, Dang.
Amber said lots of UI issues that are kind of annoying, especially inventory stuff. Ah, that sucks. The game itself is utterly fun and fantastic. Man, I'm gonna get there one day. I'm gonna get there. But yeah.
It's a Bethesda game, right?
Yes, it is.
Absolutely.
I am going to roast Bethesda games for terrible UI.
It's true. It
Well,
is.
not universally terrible UI, specifically like inventory management. They suck
One of the
at.
most popular Skyrim mods of all time is the UI overhaul that they like.
Uh-huh.
That is just truly a literal game changer. So like,
That makes sense.
yeah.
It is one of the mandatory anytime I reinstall Skyrim and play it is one of the mandatory
Absolutely.
mods.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I need to get hooked up. Hook me up. I
Yeah.
know that Lucas, you told me about setting me forward on that, or not setting me forward. What does that mean? We'll talk.
Yeah, absolutely.
You'll just
Yeah.
tell me like general like how to kind of stuff, because
Yeah.
there's a lot of mods I think vastly improved the game that they
Yeah.
kind of brought back with the anniversary edition too, which is good. But there's ones
Yeah.
like the inventory, and also like, I mean, there are some new cool outfits, but like there's also cooler ones and mods.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Well, Invert, thank you so much for the raid, and I'm glad you're
Yeah.
enjoying. I'm glad you're enjoying Starfield. You're going to have to enjoy it for both of us. So,
Yep.
at least for a little while.
Living vicariously through you, I like to say.
I feel like that's literally what Twitch streams have been built on. So,
Yes.
Yep.
And certainly like the boom of Twitch streaming in the last several years.
yep.
Getting that
absolutely.
good feeling of just like sitting on the couch in the living room and watching your friends play video games.
Absolutely. Newly Human says, back when I had my Xbox 360, the Xbox broke in a way that would crash when it played any game other than Skyrim. I basically had a Skyrim machine. That's extremely funny.
Oh,
I mean,
that's
it's
cool.
not, but it's also like just the Xbox being like, no, actually, fuck you. We're going to be playing Skyrim? Oh, you thought? No.
I had this vivid image of you putting in like game after game after game after game, and all your Xbox would do was just repeatedly load up. Like,
It's like
oh, finally, you're awake.
it's like the child. It's like the young child who refuses to eat anything except for chicken nuggets for like 5 straight weeks. You know,
Yeah.
Only Nuggy,
only Nuggy.
except only Skyrim.
Yeah. It's a good thing Skyrim is so good. That's so true. That's
Yeah.
if it was gonna get stuck on any game, like, yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
that's
yeah.
a fun question actually. If your PC or your console was going to will exclude Skyrim perhaps
Mhm.
for these purposes, or it can
Sure.
be it can you're you know you can include it, but also try and include another answer. If your PC or one of your like your game systems are going to be stuck able to play only one game, what game would you want that to be?
You can't ask me this. I have ADHD. I don't. I thrive on novelty, John. I can't do the same thing over and over again forever.
It's fair and valid. I understand. Soon, the desire to play Destiny will leave me, and I will put it down for
That's
a year and
one
a
of the
half.
biggest problems. Like whenever somebody asks me about like what my favorite insert thing is here, I don't have an answer to that because that changes constantly. What's your favorite music? Always different. My brain literally thrives on novelty, so
Yeah, fair.
and it
Also,
changes, or not even just novelty, but like it changes because I always come back around to like my favorite stuff, you know,
Mhm.
and just play the hell out of it for a long time, and then it goes away, and and it doesn't exist for me anymore for a long time, and we just do this forever.
Yep. I have to think about this one, and I think I'm gonna avoid the easy answers for me of saying like Super Metroid or Metroid Dread, because like those are played out, right? We understand. I know that if those were the only video games that I would be able to play for like a couple of years, like I would be able to survive. or that like I wouldn't be too bummed out about that, right? I think legitimately it is in the same vein though, and I think it'd probably be Hollow Knight for me.
Okay. All right.
Um, I think Hollow Knight is probably my answer to that question. There are a lot of different ways to play Hollow Knight. That game is so pretty. Um, and like I don't know, it's a game that I feel like would be good for casual running. I could try and learn to speed run it. I could there's a ton of different routes to play it. There's a ton of just like in-game challenges without even like self-imposed speed run challenges. There's a shitload of things that you can impose on yourself that are incredibly difficult. And so I think I would probably be able to sing like I would not be too disappointed if my Switch was suddenly just like the only game that you were allowed to play on me is Hollow Knight, and I just had a Hollow Knight machine.
This is technically cheating because this is actually 2 games, but they might as well not be, and you'll understand once I say it. Honestly, mine might be Knights of the Old Republic 1 and 2.
I'll accept franchises.
Yeah. Yeah. I I think I would say the Mass Effect trilogy, except that I have literally been unable to play it because I played the hell out of it so much that like I cannot stomach the thought. That will change eventually, but currently I cannot stomach the thought of playing Mass Effect currently, but it will change. But yeah, I think I would never actually get tired of, well, I would, but if I literally could not play any other game ever again, I think I'd be fine with KOTOR being, like, the KOTOR games being that. The thing is, Matt, Andromeda is fine, but that's what it is. Andromeda is fine. And I don't think I could play it forever.
Yeah.
I can barely play it. I've never finished the game because I get too overwhelmed by it, and then I just sort of, end up overwhelmed and then bored. So, yeah, that's always the trajectory for me. It's why I've also never finished Dragon Age Inquisition, because I always go into it with the intention of like, all right, this time I'm gonna finish the whole thing, and every single time I get overwhelmed and then bored. So yeah. Okay, this is an interesting. Freeman, did you have an answer for this question before I?
I do.
Yeah.
I do, but I'm at a disadvantage because although I have played various games, I haven't played enough of them or necessarily all the way through to. It's always like Skyrim is my default answer, so maybe permit me one time.
Fair enough.
It
I will
inspired
say
the
though,
question.
if the PC, however, were to get even, let's take it one step further. It's not just the game it's the only game it'll play. There's only one quest that it will allow you to play, and I would choose the Thieves Guild, like the whole story arc of the Thieves Guild mixed with like the stones of Baron Zaya. I believe you have to collect like 24, and they're hidden
Something
all
like that,
across
yep.
Skyrim. And like you eventually take them to Vax, and there's another quest on top of that where you get a really cool piece of loot at the end, and that's all I'll say. Those
Cool.
that right there, they're kind of almost tied together, but not quite.
Hell yeah.
Kind of have to, yeah.
Hell yeah.
Good answer. Okay, so I'm on the subject of. So this is something I've been thinking about recently. Thinking about because I don't know if anybody else who has played Baldur's Gate 3 has had this experience, but the experience of reaching Act 3. That's the end of the sentence. No, I'm just kidding. The experience of reaching Act 3, and after having sort of like a fairly directed, but like also still like not entirely like you had a very specific goal. It was point A to point B with a lot of like stops in between. But then once you get to Act 3, all of a sudden it opens up in a way where, for me, it's very overwhelming. And what I did is I'm still at the very beginning of Act 3, and what I ended up doing is going back and making a new character. And so that got me thinking about open world games, right? Games that are very open, and why some of them are so overwhelming, and like in some capacity, like Andromeda, Mass Effect Andromeda, and Dragon Age Inquisition, and there was another one that I was thinking of in this, but I don't remember it right now. They get over, and then why some of them you could just play, like Skyrim, you could just keep going. And I think maybe this isn't. I don't know if there's anything like specifically to discuss in this, but I thought it was an interesting thought that's been on my mind recently. Mm-hmm. But I think I've come around to the difference, and you guys let me know if you've had this similar experience or if or if I'm just totally off base here. But I think the difference is Dragon Age Inquisition and games like that, and like Mass Effect Andromeda, as opposed to Skyrim, have a whole bunch of little like sub mechanics and mini games and like things to engage in. Where like there's a crafting system, and then there's like an exploration, POI discovery system, and then there's like this sort of like a war table mechanic, and then there's this like other thing, and then there's also the main quest, but then there's like a bajillion side quests. And whereas Skyrim, there's the game, and within that game there is the main quest, and then there's like a bunch of side quests, and then there's some slightly larger quests that are like faction quests and things like that. But they're all smoothly playing the same game. You are never like dropped into some strange sub mechanic that either like choke points the game in any way or like gates your progress. It's always like there may be a combat that's too tough for you where you are, but then you can go on and do more of what you were doing but like achievable, and then come back, right? Mm-hmm. Whereas I feel like in games like Andromeda and Inquisition, there's just so much stuff to do that just feels, it takes away from like the narrative drive of the game. It takes away both the written narrative drive, but also your own internal narrative for like your character in the game, and like the and I feel like it just sort of takes away from everything, because the game there's so much to do that feels like being presented with activities as opposed to here's a big open world to explore. Does that make sense? Like, does that difference?
A little bit.
Yeah.
Where it's like it feels like you're given a task list instead of just go and explore
and find things to do that you're like, yeah. Oh, I think I do. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
And I think that for me at least that seems like the difference. But yeah, what were you saying, John?
Well, yeah, kind of like if when presented with like one of those side quests, for instance, like, okay, this one is full of like the hacking mini game or whatever, like it's full of this particular kind of mini game. Mm-hmm. It's like it's whatever like novelty it is there, as opposed to like a quest in Skyrim is most often going to be go to this cave and it's going to have things in it, and depending on what you have chosen to be stealth archer, punch cat, mage blade, glass cannon, throw fireballs all day, etc., like you're going to you never stop doing that. You're just going to a new place and doing it, and with some perhaps unique obstacles. Mm-hmm. And I think that's one of the things also that makes Breath of the Wild and its successor Tears of the Kingdom really successful, is at the end of the day, what you are doing in Tears of the Kingdom, the latest Legend of Zelda game, is here's this big open world. Also, there's a bunch of sky cat like ruins and floating in the sky now, and also there's a big cave beneath you that's full of spooky shit. We took away all of your weapons, so stick rocks to other things or strap rockets to sticks and figure it the fuck out. And that's the game. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like there is no point at which the best solution is not, I wonder how I can abuse my weird physics powers to trivialize this encounter, right? Or to solve my problems in some way. And
yeah, absolutely. I feel like even in a game, even in Baldur's Gate, like I've found that there are ways to do that, such as collecting every barrel of fire wine that I can find, and then before a fight, just dropping them everywhere, pulling my enemies into them, and then blowing them the hell up. Mm-hmm. Like that, there's things that you can do like that, abusing the mechanics, and I like when a game gives you that option to do that. I think it's probably, and this is nothing against Mass Effect Andromeda and Dragon Age Inquisition. Like I know that, but like because there are definitely people that find the game that I'm talking about as being easier to get into. That there are people that find that more overwhelming. Like they like having like, oh, this is what I can do. This is the thing that I can do, and I can do these things as opposed to being told, here's a world, go, right? There are some people who find that more overwhelming, and I can completely understand that. I just happen to not want to be one of those people. For me, I like being told, here is a world, there are problems in it, but the solutions have not been solved. It's your job to solve the solutions, right? It's your job to like put together things to get through it using the tools that you've found along the way or that we've given you through the game mechanics. It's your job to solve these problems, as opposed to a game that said like Dragon Age Inquisition. One of my biggest gripes about it was the way that it gated your progress, because you had to do certain things to get a certain number of points so that you could spend them at the war table to unlock the thing, and once you did that, then you can go to that place, and now all of a sudden there's a bunch of other tasks there in this whole new region that has opened up so that you can, get more of these points to unlock future stuff, except also there's a level gate too, so like you got to make sure that you're level appropriate for these things, and then but also there's a crafting system, and that crafting system is really important because it allows you to like kind of mitigate that level gate just a little bit. And also there's like all these materials that you can gather that'll change the appearance of the crafting that you can do. And then there's also this other thing where you manage your base at home, and I'm just like, God. I'm like, the game exhausts me. That's what my experience of playing Dragon Age Inquisition is a feeling of the game exhausting me.
Yeah, it's more like the game gives you a checklist of things that you're going to do when you do this quest, right? As opposed to the game going, here's a problem, here are your skills, solve it. And I think like that also, some of the things that you said just now circle back around to our earlier conversation about like game mechanics answer questions. Because what you said, I think you said something about like it interrupts the narrative flow of the game for you, like your ability to like have your own narrative about what's happening right now. And I can see that, right? Because the game has not only provided the question in like the side quest itself and the mechanics in the game that already exist, just baseline, but it's also provided like this set of mini games or like this crafting system or table or whatever that also is now the solution to that problem. And so that kind of like deprives you of the opportunity to be like to build your own fantasy about your character as you play them. Whereas, to pull back to Skyrim, for instance, which is kind of the start of this conversation, like when presented with a Draugr Death Scourge Overlord Banisher of Souls, like
sometimes the problem is run back along the corridor, shut the gate so he can't get to you, and then whittle him down with spells through the gate. Like
or you're playing like just a fucking barbarian, no thoughts, head empty, slap on the Daedric armor and battle axe, slug a bunch of potions, and go beat the shit out of him.
Yep. Yeah. So I don't know. It's interesting, and like Matt is pointing out in the chat here, like there are definitely strategies for dealing with these things in some of these games, but that doesn't make them fun or like And I think to call out very specifically the problem that I think, if I could only choose one thing to change about Mass Effect Andromeda and Dragon Age Inquisition, because I think I keep grouping those together because I think they have the same problems, is that they are games that are designed around an epic story, right? The setup for them is this epic story. In Dragon Age Inquisition, you're the Inquisitor. You were chosen in a sort of right place, right time kind of way, but by being right place, right time, you become kind of this chosen person to lead the Inquisition and to fix the world in some way and save the world, right? And that's a powerful narrative. Games have been built on less. That's a powerful narrative. But then the design of the game runs directly counter to that narrative by bogging you down with errands and busy work. And I think that, and then Mass Effect Andromeda has a similar thing where like different narrative, but it has this very epic kind of narrative that you're explorers in a brand new galaxy, place where humans have never set foot, and you're there to explore, to learn more about your neighboring galaxy, to set up homes for these people who gave up their lives in the previous galaxy because the journey was going to take 600 years, right? Like that's a life sentence kind of choice that you've just made for yourself, and that's a very compelling narrative. And on top of that, you play this character whose parent was leading the expedition and then dies to save you, and you kind of inherit their command, and now you, knowing basically nothing, being entirely unprepared, take command of this whole operation. Also a very compelling narrative. Once again, bogged down by busy work, side quests, and all kinds of things that completely detract from like the narrative setup. And I think that's kind of, if I had to choose only one thing to change about those games, it would be that. It would be so that, like, what's one thing, like, John, I think having designed a lot of games, design, or like spend a lot of time around game designers and narrative designers and things like that, I think you can agree with me that in most instances, a game whose mechanics don't support its central concept is a bad game.
I've just been sitting here, like, as you've been going through this, like, having that exact thought, like, that was what I was going to chime in with, which is, like, yeah, you created this amazing, epic storyline, and then the game mechanics that you built answer a different set of questions.
Yeah.
They play out a different game fantasy, like, power fantasy, than what you... Like, they're in conflict with what story you want to tell is.
And it's not to say I don't think that these things are completely incompatible. I truly don't believe that. I just think it's about portioning, right? Like, you don't want to gate the narrative behind these irrelevant mechanics. You know? Like, it's a little bit like the TTRPG equivalent, I think, is actually overland travel. Look at this, a full fucking circle. Like, everything we've been talking about, it's all related, everybody. Overland travel is a great example. If your D&D game or TTRPG, whatever, is about like this epic journey, the like heroic fantasy, jump in, swashbuckling kind of stuff, right? Then you don't need to care about overland travel rules, because that's not where the story happens. That's not where the exciting, dramatic, narrative beats of your story are going to happen. They can happen there, right? But not through like random encounter tables and things like that. It's going to be like a very not random encounter on the road where you get waylaid by servants of the enemy as you're on the way to stop their evil plan, right? That's going to be what you're going to be encountering. The next location is always going to be the thing that that moves the narrative forward, right? Like, that is the thing. However, if your game isn't that, then if your game is more exploration based, and you know, it's about scouting a territory or mapping a location for whatever, or finding a lost ruin or something like that, right? Then you want mechanics that are going to support that kind of play, i.e. overland travel rules, exploration rules, that kind of stuff. You want mechanics that are going to support the central, like the core themes of your game. And I think that's where I sort of found my friction in some of those other kind of open world games, which is, you know, the mechanics don't match the game, that like the setup for the game.
Like, yeah, no, I think that's a fairly accurate assessment of it. And if you even want something more on the order, like, yes, there is an overarching story here, but also it's very much about like the small things that happen along the way. Like, I think an exploration or an overland travel system like that makes a lot of sense. If you want an experience that is akin to like what it's like reading The Hobbit, then like that's a great system to have in your game. Absolutely. Because it's not just about like, the story is not, if the story were just about, you know, getting the treasure back from Smaug the dragon, like, that book would look entirely different.
It really would. Yeah.
But instead, like, every single thing that happens between Bilbo having an unexpected tea party with a bunch of dwarves because his wizard friend is like, you got to get out of your house, man. you know, to like Bilbo negotiating a peace between these like between elves, dwarves, and humans. Like you don't arrive at that Bilbo without everything that happened along the way.
Right.
And all
Yeah.
those small little things that forced Bilbo to like grow up.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And in a lot of
Or
ways, that story is about all of the things. It is truly about, as Matt says, the journey and not the destination. It's not a
Mhm.
That story is about
Mm.
the adventure, and I don't mean that in any sort of like philosophical, metaphorical. I mean literally, the story is about the journey. Like from the very beginning, one of the first things they tell you in that book is that hobbits don't like adventures.
Mhm.
Explicitly says almost in those
Yep.
exact words, hobbits don't are not the adventuring sort, which is the perfect setup for a story about adventure. About an
Oh
adventure.
Mhm.
yeah.
Hobbits don't like
Absolutely.
adventurers. However,
Wouldn't you know it?
Wouldn't I know those initial pages are so much about setting up how they like adventures make you late to lunch, and who the fuck wants to be late to lunch, dude?
Yeah.
I believe that's almost
terribly
exactly like
uncomfortable things, I think, is actually also a description.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
it's terribly uncomfortable. God, I need to reread that book. I found my little pocket-sized copy of The Hobbit the other day in
Oh,
one of
that's
my totes
awesome.
upstairs, and I need to go.
Yeah.
I need to get that out and read it.
but but yeah, like bringing that into like the context of like,
Mm.
you know, of video games, when you have this, like, there's I don't think there's anything wrong with the way that the games, Dragon Age Inquisition, Mass Effect Andromeda, other games like them are designed. I just think that, like, you could absolutely have a game designed that way, but maybe have a less narratively driven setup, right?
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if Mass Effect Andromeda was a game that didn't have a epic narrative, and I genuinely, with in the in the in the case of Andromeda, I do think that they were a little bit shackled by the expectations set by the trilogy, because that
Mm-hmm.
was a very intensely narrative focused game where everything in it served that greater narrative, even mechanically or whatever. Um, and But if it was a setup where, for example, they were just, it was truly about exploration of a new galaxy, then and there was no like narrative drive with like, oh, but there's these enemies that are here for some reason, and they set up a really weak, weird conflict, right? If it was truly about exploration, then I think that game is probably designed perfectly fine. If you like remove
Mm-hmm.
the central narrative from that game, I actually think it's fine. I think it works.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I don't know. I feel like I've talked about this for way too long. Anyway, I feel like I've just gone
No,
off about this.
I think it's an interesting conclusion to the conversation that been having tonight about like game mechanics and like play experience, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I think I think it's a nice way of pointing out like the ways in which you can over answer like with game mechanics. You can get lost in the act of like, oh, we can do all of these neat little things. Yes, but should you?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, like
Yeah.
the at what point do you want to like get out of your own way and let the kind of like baseline stuff just like let people choose how they want to interact with it, like finding the right blend of um, how do I provide the play experience that I want that allows people to explore like a narrative within this while also kind of sticking to that core play experience and not like overdoing it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think this is really interesting. Jade. Hi, Jade. Welcome on in. Sorry I didn't say it earlier, um, but Jade says players are astonishingly attuned to details and blindsided by the cryptic. That's very interesting.
Mm.
I'm going back through my head in the conversation, just figure out exactly at what point you said that. But I think that is a very interesting and very true thing. Um, Astonishingly attuned to details and blindsided by the cryptic. Yeah, yeah, that is really interesting.
I
I'm
think
trying to. Oh yeah, go ahead, John.
this takes me back, honestly, to a piece of advice that you gave me early on when I was GMing.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a habit of just kind of like explaining places in great detail,
Mm-hmm.
just like across the board. And that would result in people like thinking that something that I had described in some amount of detail because I thought it was cool or was just there was something that was like the next thing they needed to go interact with. And I think that's part of like the tabletop RPG experience because the games are a conversation and like everything that happens is happening here. We're making those places in our heads as we talk about them. It's a matter of like when you describe something, you speak it into existence, and the more of it you speak into existence, the firmer it becomes in your players' minds. So if you describe this weird little Blorbo who's selling like frog necklaces on the corner and he's got like this fucked up little guy, of course your player's gonna be like, that's the guy we need to go talk to, man.
Yeah.
There's a mysterious stranger in a hooded cloak on the corner. They're like, we've seen a million of those. Like,
Yeah. No, it's true. It's very true, and I think that part of that comes from, and maybe this is probably part of a larger conversation. But the idea, I think it's very tempting, especially if you have a background in writing in some capacity or another. It's very tempting to approach TTRPGs, in particular from the GM side, as a writing exercise. And the reality, I think, is that that's true in some capacity, but very untrue in other capacities. And like the obvious example is like the standard one where it's like if you like as far as like railroading, right? Like writing a story that is inflexible to the player's decisions along the way and their input. Um that's the obvious one. But I think also is the thing that you said, John, which is like if you approach it from a writing perspective, then but you like are unaware of which aspects of writing apply, then you end up like describing in great flowery detail these locations and these settings, and you end up with that problem. Whereas I think the part of writing that is most relevant to GMing and playing actually too even is a strong understanding of narrative. Not the
tropes,
actual
tropes, tropes, tropes,
yes,
tropes.
exactly. Not the actual like technique of writing, but a strong understanding of narrative. And like obviously you don't need to have this. I think you can have a perfectly fine time playing TTRPGs without this. But if what you are wanting to come to the game with is game or if you're wanting to come away from the game with is a satisfying narrative experience, then you have to have a strong understanding of narrative um, in a way that allows you to know like where like what are the beats that need to be hit that need to hit. Is this conversation over now or are we going to keep talking, right? Is this scene done? Does this scene need more to it, right? Those are the like the parts of writing that are important in a TTRPG. Does this action serve, I think this from the player side this is the most common one, right? Does this action serve the concept of this character, right? That's I think a big one. And I think those are the aspects of writing that I think are the most important. And I say this pure from personal experience, but also from like observed experience. Uh, if you come to it from a writing background, then it's very tempting to look at it as if you are writing a story. But the writing part isn't the important part. It's the understanding of the narrative flow. That's what matters. And so, I feel like I forgot
Yeah.
my original point, but when I went off on that, but that's yeah.
That can be Ramblemancy.
I was gonna say to simplify that. Basically, the idea is that the most important aspects of writing or storytelling that are important to tabletop RPGs is the understanding of the pieces of a story,
There it is.
right?
Yep.
And like knowing like, oh, this is like a wise old mentor versus like a scary like a terrifying like stranger or something like that. Or this is a like, what stage of the story are we in, so that I know what should I be looking for right now. Should I be looking for ways to make my character stronger, or should I be beelining for the giant like obelisk of like flame touched onyx in like on the horizon, right? That kind of thing.
Yeah.
You don't want to build encounters in the flame touched obelisk for your level 1 D&D players. They will die.
Yeah.
They are made of paper.
This reminds me free, and I think it kind of goes along with what Jade says here. Writing exercises are great for practicing the balance of providing enough framework and outline to allow the reader to fill in the rest themselves. Yes. Thank you, Jade. Yes, absolutely. And I will add to that free piece of writing advice here. And this is something that I say this because this is something that I'm in caveat. I'm in no way an authority on writing or the written word at all. So I'm just going to put that out there. But this is just a piece of my experience that like I wish that somebody, when I was an undergrad English writing major, I wish somebody had told me this. What the advice that I got in a lot of creative writing classes and contexts that were outside of classes like workshops and things like that was cliches are bad. And that's true, and it's a good advice kind of to give to somebody who is a novice in writing. I think it's good advice because you want to break people of the habit of going to cliches. That's important. Cliches can be destructive if applied incorrectly. But here's the thing that I wish people had told me when I was writing, when I was learning to do creative writing. I wish that they hadn't stopped at don't use cliches. I wish that they had said, learn everything you can about the technique of writing without cliches, and then study the cliches.
That's cool.
Because once you know how the cliches are most often applied, the cliches and the tropes and that kind of stuff are often applied, then once you have an intimate understanding of how they're applied, then you can start playing with them. You can start turning them on their heads. You can set up this cliche and then turn it around. And you can make those things, those subversions, fit with your themes. You can
almost blend and hide.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like you want to create. I'm not going to come up with a concrete example off the top of my head, but it's that idea that exactly, Newly Human. Once you learn the rules and understand them, that's when you get to start breaking them, and that's absolutely true. And I think that's extremely important. And this is something that genuinely, I think I would be doing something else with writing right now had I gotten this piece of advice. I think I might have pursued it, but I got discouraged because I was given pieces of advice that were good but lacking in context. And those were discouraging to me because they made me feel like I was a bad writer. And they were discouraging. And I think advice is good. Advice without context can be destructive, and I think that's kind of the thing. So I don't know if anybody needs to hear it. It's just as useful in TTRPGs as well. Like, just as useful. Like, once you know the tropes, once you know the cliches, you can take them, you can start playing with them, and you can turn them on their head, and that's where great stories come from, because then it's coming from you. It's coming from your experience, and what you bring to those cliches and those tropes and those stories that you're writing, that's what matters. That's how you tell interesting, creative, and cool stories. And you avoid this question of like, well, somebody else has written this already. Why am I doing it? So,
yeah, like trope. The most like pithy way that I can think to say that is that tropes are tools, and when you are a like beginning writer, it's very easy to over rely on them. But just like anything else, like a hammer is not always necessarily the solution to every problem in the house, but it is good for some of them. And you can use a hammer in a lot of ways. And this actually, that also takes me back to Gen Con 2019. A couple of very good panels that I went to with Monty Cook and Shauna Germain. And I remember a question that somebody asked on one of those panels was, something to the effect of, I feel like so many people have made so much good stuff. Like, how do I make something good? And the answer essentially was to like, well, take the things that you are interested in
Mm-hmm.
and look at them and then find the space between them where they stick together. And I guarantee you, if you hand a room of people the same two tropes or ideas, or three tropes or ideas, concepts, themes, whatever, in a room of 20 people, you will have 20 wildly different stories, because the connections that people are going to see are going to be different. They'll still have the same core elements, but how those elements are used is very different, because the way that we see the connections, that any one person sees the connections between tropes and ideas,
Mm-hmm.
is different based
Yeah.
on taste, media you've consumed,
Mm-hmm.
anything.
If you want to be proficient at a thing, follow the rules. If you want to be great at a thing, break the rules.
Yeah.
That's yeah. That's the best way that I
Mm-hmm.
can put it. Uh, I feel like that's a good note to end on. It is kind of the end of our stream here, but
Yeah.
um, this felt like a particularly this was like a windy roundabout ramblemancy. Like we sort of started out talking about not really anything, and then food, and we kind of went around to game design and TTRPGs, video games, and we just sort of went all over the map.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we started not really having a topic, and then I asked a very noodly game design question, and we got here, and I had a lot of fun.
Me
Yeah.
too.
Oh man. Oh man. All right. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for coming and hanging out with us tonight. Invert, you're definitely not here anymore, which I do not begrudge you that, because you've been streaming for a long time. So thank you so much for your raid. Anybody who stuck around from that raid, thank you for coming. Wait, Invert, you are here. Never mind.
Oh, hello.
Well, hello. I take it back. But yeah, thank you so much for the raid. Anybody who's still here from the raid, thank you. We hope to see you again in the future. We'll probably be back for Ramblemancy next week. I can't think of a reason that we wouldn't be here. But so we'll see you hopefully next week for more Ramblemancy. But if not, we'll see you the next time you decide to come roll with us. Thank you so much, everybody. Good night and good zone.
Mwah.